Please allow me to introduce you to Monika Sturm, founder of Women's Finance Coach. Karmen Tang, founder and CEO of Another Startup Story. And Jiang, founder of Biomark. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies. Let's start with getting to know you guys a little bit. So Monika, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your career path?
Originally, I'm from Austria, and I studied in Austria, and then I decided to start our career somewhere else. So it worked out from 30 years on. I had a corporate career at a German multinational, which I very, very much enjoyed, and I learned a lot. And then when our daughter came, and I had some family reasons to return to Austria. I spent another 7 years living in Austria, in my home country. And after that, we decided we want to go back to Singapore and pursue our careers here. I have a degree in business and was majoring in finance and accounting.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for that intro. Karmen, you're next in line in the seating, so I'm going to go to you, ask you the same question. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your career path?
Oh, thanks for the kind intro. So I'm Karmen, and I'm from the UK. I've been living in Singapore for about 3 years now. I'm also a qualified chartered accountant who really was fed up with the corporate world and fell in love with the creative industry. I then went to work as the financial controller of an advertising agency back in London, got sent over to Singapore to cover someone on maternity leave, and then eventually ended up, starting my own consultancy, which is called Another Startup Story, which is basically a business coaching platform and a media platform to encourage, inspire, and educate creatives to follow their passion and to start their own business. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. And Kun, we've chatted before as well.
We have.
Can you tell me a bit about yourself and your career path, and everyone in the audience as well?
Of course, Lindsay. So I'm Karmen. I'm Chinese Australian, and I've been in Singapore for about 8 years now. So I'm trained as a lawyer by training, but I didn't practice law. So post my law degree, I went into investment banking for 6 years. After that, I decided to get my MBA from INSEAD. So that's how I came to Singapore. Post my MBA, I decided to go into private equity, and it was during my private equity career that I started looking at healthcare in great amount of detail, and I was responsible for looking after some of the biggest private hospital groups in the region from an investor's perspective. And it was during that time that I got really into and involved in the laboratories of hospitals. And that's also when I realized that there was a really big gap in the market. A lot of the laboratories are still doing very much manual-based workflows. And so 3 years ago, I started Biomark, which is a health tech company that digitized the whole entire lab workflow. I actually sold the company last year during COVID because the company was doing COVID testing results delivery, and we got acquired by a very large healthcare organization in the region. So that's
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Very good news story. And so what inspired you to start that particular company? I guess your background, but can you tell us a bit more about that inspiration?
Yes, so it was really interesting because I've never really, gotten into healthcare until I started doing private equity. And that's when I spent a lot of times in hospitals in Southeast Asia. And that's when I sort of saw firsthand some of the very big problems that existed in the healthcare system, things like not enough doctors, not enough training, and not getting adequate care. And in particular, when I was doing a laboratory project, I realized that a lot of things were still done manually, and that to me was quite incredible, given the amount of technology and technical innovation that's occurred in other industries. So that's when 3 years ago I thought there is definitely a gap in the market, a problem to solve, and decided to take the plunge and to solve that problem essentially.
Excellent. So impressive. Monika, what inspired you to start your company?
Well, probably first and foremost, the ups and downs of my own life made me really aware that it's important to be financially independent, and it's important to, as a woman, to be able to handle your own finances. So when I retired early from my management position at a multinational, I moved to Austria, and I had my father and my little daughter to take care of, and I decided I need a mental challenge. I need some kind of professional challenge, and that brought me back to my very old, or to my passion earlier on in life, in financial markets. And then I started managing a family portfolio for now almost close to 20 years. And when I realized that a number of women earn less, consequently they have less savings, and also consequently they end up with having less retirement money, that brought me to the decision to start Women's Finance Coach, to help women, to enable them to take their finances into their own hands, and to gain financial independence, and to learn through Women's Finance Coach, learn investing, and also learn financial planning.
Absolutely. I think it's a nice blend of the last panel we just had too with purpose. You're very much blending purpose with the business case, which is really interesting.
It's purpose, which is really, I find it really, really important. And it's also my passion. So I have a good benefit in that.
Excellent, excellent. And Karmen, what inspired you to start another startup story?
Kind of a similar reason as well. I kind of, as a chartered accountant, there's a very clear kind of corporate ladder. It's very, it can go up quite easily. But I just felt like there was something missing. And for me, it was that, that impact and that purpose, and wanting, just like the desire to want to help other people and feel like you are, helping in some way or form. And so I really started out by, my role working at the advertising agency. I was giving workshops and tutorials to creatives on how to understand business acumen and how to read a P&L, like all the nitty-gritty stuff. And so I was like, if, creatives and account handlers are struggling, then surely creative entrepreneurs will need this information too. And I was like, I can kind of really just try and help bridge the gap between creativity and, the left and the right brain. And so also from, I guess, a personal journey, I went through like a huge, spiritual transformation. And I went through a stage where I just like questioned everything, like how I live my life, what my dreams and goals and purposes were, and even down to like my habits. And I think that's when I got really into personal development, which is a huge part of another startup story. A lot of the content that we post is really around, personal development and mindset. And so, yeah, for me, it was more of like an inner transformation, which made me realize, hey, like, and I feel like the business has kind of kept me accountable for that in a way.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
And do you have a good community around you as well that you feel like also helps keep you accountable for, continuing forward? Because I know you always have a lot on.
Exactly. So we have an online community, and, pre-COVID, we had a lot more events and workshops, but obviously now it's quite hard. So we've been doing a few webinars, but it's good. There's a community for sure.
Excellent. Well, and we're talking about community and people and time. And I guess I'll give you the next question as well, is what's one thing founders always underestimate?
Oh, definitely mindset. I think for me, I feel like a lot of people don't underestimate how hard it is. And the thing is, when you start a business, there's so many different types of businesses, and you can read as many books and look at as many business models as you can. But the truth is, you can have the right ingredients, but the outcome is always going to be different because there are so many changing factors. And so that's why I think mindset and, looking at resiliency, all those soft skills and, and failure, like I always see you know, failure is a good thing. And I'm always thinking about how can I fail faster and how can I learn more? Because if you don't, then yeah, you're not really learning as much. So
The growth mindset then.
yes,
is what you're
the
really
growth mindset is exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think is the one thing founders tend to underestimate? Maybe what did you underestimate?
Well, yes.
You get personal.
I think two things that might be a bit more practical in terms of advice. One is to be very careful about your cap table. So when you're raising money, who you raise money from, and the structure of your investors, and also your co-founders as well. So making sure that you have the right co-founders and making sure that the structure from the very beginning makes a lot of sense and has that flexibility to take into account, you know, changes as the startup journey unfolds. So that's number one. And then number two, I think, is especially with women founders, I think we underestimate ourselves and underestimate what we can achieve, you know, using our own abilities, and I think that's something that, you know, is very linked to the mindset as well. So I think, you know, don't underestimate yourself would be my advice.
And I think you have a very impressive story that you built a business, built a family, sold a business, all within the space of just a few years,
Yes.
which I find pretty incredible.
Yes.
Because that's a lot of time, whether
Yes.
from people, from business, stakeholder, whatever you want to call it. That's a lot of people involved in your life.
Yes, absolutely.
Requiring a lot of time.
So you have to, I think, so just a bit of background. So I had 2 kids while studying and selling my business. So in a space of about 3 years. And yes, so basically you have to manage your time and you have to make really hard choices about where you spend your time. And you have to make quite a lot of sacrifices as well.
So that's a good word to the wise for people starting. And how about you, Monika? What do you
Very
think people
impressive.
underestimate? Yeah, very impressive.
From my experience with some startups that I was involved with before I started Women's Finance Coach, my observation was that often marketing and marketing strategy and product positioning is often underestimated. You think you have a wonderful product and everybody has to love the product, and you think, or a wonderful service. But it's very often difficult to align this with the market requirements. So I would say, aside from product development, the other 50% to success is really marketing. And that brings me to another observation that I made. Very often when you have difficulties with marketing, I think it's a good thing if you find an angel investor that works in the same industry and has that industry experience or is invested in that industry. And with that, you have the possibility to not only secure that your marketing activities are going in the right direction and your product or service positioning, but at the same time, you hopefully find an angel investor that is interested in helping you to groom your business, helping you to bring your business to success, rather than just looking solely at the return of the investment. I think that's something that I find for startups very, very important.
Very good insight. Very good insight. It's nice to talk about the actual investment side, because I think a lot of us are at the stage of, I'm just starting to be my own boss. I may start a business.
Yeah.
There's actually a whole other bit of it we need to think about, which is financing the business, selling, what's the exit strategy for our
financing it
business?
long term,
Yeah.
not short term, not financing rounds A, B, C, D, but make somebody your anchor investor that is prepared to see the business grow through and lead it to success, rather than saying, okay, do I have my 10% return or whatever I expect to come out of that investment.
And on the investor journey, I guess, going off my cards and off the questions, on the investor journey, is there anywhere you'd suggest people who are just starting to think about getting investors, you know, people who might not have as broad of a network, or, you know, how can people get started finding investors if they did want to go down that path for their business?
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one. Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of people out there, a couple of family offices out there that are, and then there are usually events where you know, fundraising events that you can join. But to find the right match
Is the challenging
is
part.
the challenge.
Is the challenging part. Fair enough.
I would say to start with your immediate network, though, you know, given that people are investing not just the company, but in you as well. So people who know you are more likely to understand, you know, your heart for whatever mission or whatever business you're trying to build. So, yeah, start with your immediate.
Especially for the long term.
Yeah.
So I have a question here to everyone. Is there anything from the audience? Is there anything in particular you should be aware of when starting your side hustle next to your full-time job?
Oh, it's possible. It's possible. I think, you know, in terms of when to make that decision of when the side hustle becomes your full-time job, that's easy to answer. I think that's when, you know, you can always build, I think, a minimal viable product with very little, you know, money, probably still time, but with very little capital. So, you know, once that is proven, that's probably the right time to think about, you know, moving from your side hustle to your main job, as a main job. But before you have proved your concept, I would not recommend quitting
the day job. Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one other point I would add is also the financial runway that you have. Everyone has different, you know, risk appetites, different financial situations, really understanding, you know, how much this business is going to cost, what are the fixed costs, what are the variable costs, what is your runway for how many months, you know, how much do you need to live, like really calculating all of this out and making sure that you're comfortable with the margin that you have before you quit your job and go full throttle with your side hustle.
Very good advice. And Monika could help you with those finances and get those sorted, couldn't she? So Monika, a question to you specifically. It's sort of the same. It's when is the right time to get started, but not necessarily around a side hustle, but just any idea at all. You know, if you have a full-time job, is it as soon as you feel the fire and the passion to get started?
Exactly. It's exactly when you really feel that you want to be an entrepreneur, that you want to run your own business. That's really the time to start. That's the time to start. And also you need to be prepared to take decisions, and you need to be comfortable to take own decisions or decisions by yourself. That's another factor. If those two, then
you've got it. Then you're ready. Then you're ready. Here's another one from the audience, from Tanisha to Monika. Very popular today, Monika. In addition to handling one's own finances or their own finances, what was another big contribution to you personally, taking the plunge into a daunting sector? So calling the financial services daunting sector.
I think for me, it was always a passion. It started in school, it continued at university, and then I ended up somewhere completely different with my, not completely different, but, you know, working for a multinational gives you a lot more broader picture. But of course, if it's a public listed company, you learn that side too. So I think for me, it was just a passion that I always had. Why, I can't tell why I had it, why I had that fable for financial investing, but it was there. And then the next step was, yes, how can I contribute something to society? How can I make an impact? And that led to Women's Finance Coach, trying to combine, you know, both sides, my passion and also the benefit of women, and women in particular, because women have a different kind of investing behavior. They have a different affinity to risk than men, very often, not always, but very often. So I find, and then of course, women very often leave the finances to their husbands. And then at one point in your life, you are alone. Statistically, women outlive men. So the chances that you have to take care of your finances at some point in your life are there. So better get started younger. And the younger you start, the better, because then you have the benefit of the wonder of compounding, as I call it, the compounding of interest that, of course, helps you to grow your assets faster and better.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the earlier, the better. And for women in particular, I think there's about 80% of women leave their finances to their husbands. So if you look at the fact that not all marriages last forever, and the fact that maybe you might outlive your husband, it's better to start early in life to take care of your finances. And interest rates are low these days, so you have to look into the financial markets for a decent return.
I think you're really to summarize is taking ownership. It's taking ownership.
Yes.
If are you ready to make the plunge to being your own boss? It's are you ready to take ownership of every aspect of it, from the finance to the marketing you mentioned before, to the fundraising that you were talking about. Are you ready for all of that? And Karmen, I mean, for you really do have a multifaceted business. You have a lot going on in your day to day. So how do you juggle everything you have going on? And maybe if you can talk a little bit about the different platforms and the different, methods you have for running your business and promoting your business and sharing content about your business.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just gave a webinar talk to Barclays today to employees on time management and productivity, because I do a lot of other things outside of the business as well, all kind of contributing. But I think for me, if anyone wants, I can share the deck. But I have what I would say is to make sure you have the right priorities in your life, and always to, I guess, a few tips that kind of come to mind is always leave your deep work to the mornings, and trying to move meetings in the afternoon. I always do admin stuff, or try to do it Thursday and Friday afternoons when I'm least focused. Having a solid morning routine, which most people generally do, that's changed my life. And trying to just get exercise first thing in the morning. Turning WhatsApp notifications off has changed my life. So I only check my messages when I go into the app. And also trying to delegate, really research into, outsourcing and delegating, read up what a VA is, virtual assistant. And yeah, Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week is really good. I recommend that. And yeah, good. That's what comes off.
Those are really good tips. Thank you. Those are really good tips, and clearly come from a personal learning, which are like, don't make the same mistakes I made. Yeah, exactly. And we talked about books before, so you mentioned a couple resources there. I know you had a book that was quite impactful on you. You mentioned the Lean.
Yes, the Lean Startup. That's a really good book to read if you're thinking about launching your business or launching a product. So that's something I would recommend.
And do you feel like during the time you were growing your business, did you do a lot of reading on the side, or were you pretty far into the business? How did you keep up with just what was relevant?
I didn't have as much time to read. When you're in the business, it's 100-hour weeks type thing. So there's no time really. But what I did try to do is listen to podcasts to get that information, especially during downtime when you're on plane rides in the region. And so one of the podcasts I would recommend is How I Built This. It's extremely inspirational and definitely, when you've had a bad meeting or a bad day, you listen to it on the plane, and it sort of helps you keep going, knowing that the other entrepreneurs have gone through the same journey and experienced the same ups and downs. So that's something that I would recommend.
Ownership, time management, a little bit about finding inspiration, even when things are difficult. It's, that resilience to fight through. So all these are good qualities for meaning you're ready to be your own boss. What's the, sorry, go ahead.
Another book that I would like to recommend is Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, I love that. I've read it.
Yeah, last year. It's really good. You can, Ray Dalio is a famous and very successful entrepreneur and investor. And he's written this book about his principles, very unconventional principles that helped him to create an amazing business. And I think reading this book helps you not only to grow as a person, but also to grow your business in the right way.
it's very, very, to me, it is very, very insightful. And it can be linked, you can actually follow him on LinkedIn. So his main principles, he posts
Just
on
like
LinkedIn.
bite-sized messages. He posts bite-sized messages on LinkedIn.
Yes,
doesn't
he
he?
does, yeah. So I find that very inspiring.
That is a good one. I think Adam Grant did one of his first podcasts with interviewing Ray Dalio, talking about radical candor and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing in the workplace. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Let me check some more messages here. What is your number one piece of advice to the next generation of female founders? Who wants to start? Karmen, should we give it to you?
Number one piece of advice. I think as females, we tend to have a lot of self-doubt, you know, and imposter syndrome is real. I would say just really believe in yourself, and, you know, find your own answer, even if that's not the answer that you think everyone's given you. And also not to underestimate common sense. You know, I think it's so important, especially when starting your own business. I think creative thinking is super important as well. And yeah, just continuing to believe in yourself and to keep trying and not to give up.
Again, resilience. Good word, resilience. Monika, what would you say?
I would say you have to be prepared to take pain. But that pain leads you to reflection.
You're laughing too hard on this side of me. Too much comfort with the difficulties of your own business.
That pain leads you to reflection, and that reflection ultimately guarantees you success. Just keep on going. Never mind the pain.
Fight through.
Fight through it.
What would you think? What would be your piece of advice for?
I would say embrace the fact that you're female. Right? Embrace the difference. Embrace the fact that you know you can bring whatever energy you have to the workplace and create a culture which is a lot more, let's say, family friendly, perhaps, and just embrace that part of you. And I think if more female founders, you know, exist or you know, we have a new generation of female founders, and it's might change the paradigm of what a founder looks like. And that's what I'd like to see.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for that. All right, a few questions to all. Which marketing tools do you use for your own business, and how did you find your customer audience? So marketing, which is one of the first challenges you said, it's quite tough. So which marketing tools do you use? Are there a couple that you found helpful when you needed to, you know, broadcast either a launch or, you know, set some campaigns?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is one of the social media that I really like, and that seem to produce results. In a very traditional face-to-face networking, particularly in this side of the business, you need to build up trust and you need to meet people in person. Also through my website, I do a lot of website email marketing. So this is I haven't explored Facebook yet, but this is on my list.
Soon. Yeah,
This is on my list, yes.
Excellent. And Karmen, for another startup story?
Yeah, I think it depends on, you know, what your business is and who your target market is, because that will determine which marketing tools you want to use. Obviously, if you're selling, you know, like a fashion e-commerce brand, Instagram is number one, you know, maybe LinkedIn less so. So really looking at who your target market is. And I just want to reiterate, you know, how important it is to understand who your target market is, and not just like the gender, you know, what gender they are, how old they are, but, you know, what books do they read, what podcasts they listen to. I think so many businesses assume they know what their client or customer likes or is into, but often they are proven wrong due to lack of sales or lack of interest. So really investing the time and the energy to understand and do the research. And then therefore that will determine what marketing strategies, I guess, platforms.
Fair enough. Did you find this relevant for you when you're looking at the marketing side, or was it just so popular right away because it was such a needed?
Well, so my was a B2B business, so we did very specific B2B marketing, and I think in B2B marketing, you're really clients are looking to see whether you really understand and can solve their problem. And that's what you need to demonstrate to them. And then also it's very long lead times. So it's a lot of relationship building, face-to-face relationship building as well. So that's what I would say.
And
It's key for B2B businesses.
which I think you might be a really good person for advice on, in a time where we're much more virtual, and perhaps at the time we were able to do a lot more in person. Do you have any advice for, having kind of the best virtual, discussions you could possibly have?
It's definitely much more difficult, I think, to do it virtually. But I think, people are starting to get used to that. Mm-hmm. But I think with any meeting, virtual or in person, just be very, very prepared, right? Because people can tell if you're prepared for the meeting or not. And it's better to be over prepared than under prepared, and demonstrating that you really understand the problem and have the solution to solve the problem is, I think, really key to getting the deal.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. We're getting a lot from the crowd. How much work experience do you recommend before starting your own business?
I don't think there's an exact answer. It depends on the business. Yeah, what industry, how ballsy you are.
Yeah. Risk
I would say
appetite.
at least
Absolutely.
5 years. At least 5 years. If you're really the entrepreneurial spirit. If you're not, then maybe even a bit longer. Yeah, because there's a lot you can learn.
And what about in those 5 years? Are there some kind of key things that you think people should walk away with in their first 5 years of work? Is there anything around client management or anything in particular?
No. Prove that whatever task or whatever job you were given, you can actually succeed. You see, it's very important that you can actually demonstrate success rather than just hopping from one to the next. But I think that's really, really important. And that gives you also the self-confidence that whatever you were set out to do, you've actually achieved.
Thank you. Makes sense. And having a few years in the workplace, does feel like a nice start. Just to for instance, you had amazing progress in the early part of your career, and financial controller for an agency, and then moving overseas. Pretty impressive stuff there. Karmen, a random one for you, which is nice. A favor of the name. What inspired the name for another startup story?
It sounds a bit corny, but it actually came up in a dream. I remember just dreaming about it, and I woke up the next morning and was like, I'm going to check if the domain name is free, and it was. I was surprised, to be honest, because
great name.
Yeah, I was. It's pretty. Yeah, but that is your answer. Came up in a dream.
If only it was that easy all the time, right? If only everyone had.
There is an art to finding names, and people do work. Brand strategists do workshops around naming. So it isn't as kind of elusive as that usually.
And with naming, do you feel like it's something that if you get the name, you pick the name, you go with the name, and then you want to change it a couple years later? Do you feel like it's easy to do, or is it a difficult thing to do? Not that you want to, great name, but what would be kind of advice for someone who was really caught up on the name and felt worried to go to market because they just didn't like the name and they weren't thinking of that fantastic name to come up with? Again, marketing.
I think it depends again on the business. Obviously, if you're retail, then thinking about all the clothes or jewelry pieces, you have to reprint out the logo and everything, but for like a consultancy or service base, it's much easier. You just do a rebrand on the website and, just change it online. So it depends if you're happy to, fork up the cost for reprinting. But I would say a lot of companies go through rebrands, and it can be a good way to kind of revitalize your company. So I wouldn't stress too much, if you want to change the name.
Absolutely, along the way. And where did BioMark come from?
Well, we wanted the world to be biomarking, which is the act of following your biomarkers and tracking them so that you can detect disease before they occur. So that was the idea behind biomarking.
That's great. Absolutely great. And what's next for you then? So you're an entrepreneur of spirit, we know. What's next for you?
So I've sort of gone onto the other side, and so now I do a bit of angel investing. Supporting startups, and I do mentorships for startups as well. So I'm trying to give back to the community now.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, you certainly have the experience, that's for sure, which is excellent. Is there anything else you think we should let people know about making the plunge to being your own boss? Or any final bits of advice? We've talked about a lot today. That it's super easy, that everyone should do it.
I would say make sure that you have sort of your support network around you when you take the plunge. So make sure that you've got supportive friends and family that will see you through.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
That's
really
very
key.
important.
I also agree, very important. You know, making sure you speak to people and are connected with people who have done it before and are a few steps ahead of you really helps. Otherwise, you know, because for me, a lot of it was just like an emotional stress. It wasn't even like I didn't know what to do strategically, but you know, emotionally, you feel lonely, especially if you're a solo founder.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, a lot of what we're seeing coming up is most of what we've discussed. Everyone has a tech element in their business. We see a lot of a growing knowledge economy, which your business I know Karmen has, and obviously at Monika as well, and how you can turn kind of your intellectual capital into a business. I think it's not being scared to think big and also just to be bold and, like you said, get out there and just do it. You have to start somewhere. So, if you're unsure of where to get started, really at the end of our chat, there's so much more to hear. So please reach out to any of us on this panel or the Female Factor, and you can learn more about their membership panel. So enjoy the rest of your conference, everyone, and thanks for joining us here in Singapore.